Eagles. Eagles.
Welcome in, everybody, a Football Friday edition of Birds 365 here as we prepare for a weekend of football, but the Eagles will not play until Monday. So we still will have another Birds 365 to go before the Philadelphia Eagles kick off their Week 2 game. Johnny Mack, Football Friday, my man. Happy Football Friday to you. How you doing on this Friday morning?
Yeah, I wish we had a game Sunday, but we got the crazy schedules for a couple more weeks, so we'll get through it. Monday Night Football, Week 2. It's always Kirk Cousins in Week 2 for this game.
It does seem to be the trend. I don't know how. Has it been 3 years now?
This is the third consecutive year.
Yeah. And then I think they destroyed them both of the last 2 years, didn't they?
Yeah, they destroyed them 2 years ago. Last year they got the big lead, and Minnesota got a bunch of whatever garbage yardage, whatever. But
I remember the 2 years ago game, crystal clear. They thrashed them.
2 years ago they killed them. Last year it was more of
that was kind of Jalen Hurts' not coming out party, but after the 9-7 season or the
it was they basically dared Jalen Hurts to beat him, and they killed him. And that was Ed Donatel, Vic Fangio scheme Vikings that were one of the worst defenses I ever saw in my life. So, and then they shifted last year, as they had to Brian Flores, which is much better, but they just don't have much talent on defense.
Yeah, no doubt. So we'll preview the game. In hour number 2, we have an exciting guest, Thomas Mott, who's been absolutely crushing it on YouTube. He had 100,000 plus views on his live stream of the game in week 1. So great stuff from Thomas Mott. He'll join us in hour number 2. Looking forward to talking to him, and we will get into the breakdown of this game offensively and defensively here in hour number 1. Johnny Mac, before I do that, we'll get into the Eagles news yesterday. A couple players spoke, and then there was some practice squad moving. Yesterday on the show, I said, Jack Stoll, he's gone. The show ends and Jack Stoll is back.
Yeah, he never left. He never
left.
What
did the practice squad? What happened with the practice squad yesterday for the
they're doing some procedural stuff. Basically, we're moving guys in and off. Now Jack and Caden Stearns are a part of it because they've been banged up. So there's the ability to sort of get some other players paid for the week. The Kevin Fulches of the world. By the way they're doing it. So it's basically it's a procedural move. Jack's going to be here. Even when he's not here, Caden Stearns is going to be here. Even when he's not here. And they're trying to do a solid for certain players. But by churning the back end and getting guy Griffin Bear's another one of them. If they're on the practice squad, I believe Tuesday, I'm not sure about the day, then they're going to get paid for the week. So they generally do the churn and try to get some guys they're trying to take care of, an extra paycheck here and there. You can't do it every week because then you'd have a practice squad of 19 people, 20 people, whatever, but they're trying to rotate it as much as possible.
So in a way, they're kind of trying to be a good organization and get a couple extra guys, some more paychecks.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the point of what they're trying to build and why so many people, I'm not saying that's why, but there's a lot of people that want to play here.
Yeah.
And they generally do little things like that make people want to play here, which is a good thing.
I was thinking about the human element of it, John, where it's like you're on, you're off. It's like you're going to another team, you're coming back. It's got to be a little tough on these guys. I mean, they are humans at the end of the day. A lot of times we look at these players and we think they're, pieces on a chessboard. They are humans. They have real thoughts and feelings and everything. And, so I do think I wonder what the human element of it is, where you're just like,
the guys, the guys like Caden Stearns and Jack Stoll, like they're made aware of what's going on. So they're, and they're veteran players, and it's going to be made up to them on the back end, and the ability that they're not healthy right now. So you sort of build those relationships, and so they're well aware. Like Jack, I saw Jack yesterday. He never left. It's not like there was uncertainty. He knew what was going on. So, it's just a little procedural thing. Try to get some extra guys some money.
Yeah, good stuff. Zeal says that's the job. You are right, Zeal. It is the job, but I do just, I'm trying to be empathetic at least to the people and not just focus so much on the game. When I was young, my dad used to tell me, athletes are people who play games for a living. The people are important. The games are not. Now, Eagles fans might not want to hear that because the games are important to them, but the people are more important for sure. So,
Oh yeah, I tell everybody, like, the minute you tell me, I say, so many people go on social media and say certain insert player's name is made of glass or he gets hurt. I immediately, and I'm telling the people right now, I immediately mute you. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to. It's dumb. Um, you know, they're playing a sport that we all, if we were out there for one day, we'd probably never come back. So, people that say they're made of glass, yeah, I have no time for that. Similar, you saw what happened with Tua last night.
yeah.
Very dangerous game. Still, as much as they try to legislate it out, very dangerous game.
Yeah, what do you think's going to happen there? Let's go there before I was going to ask you about a couple of the press conferences from the Eagles yesterday. By the way, I want to welcome everybody in today. Thanks, everybody, for being in the chat. Our Birds 365 crew, Johnny Mac, has been crushing it on our show, baby. Everybody has been destroying it. The podcast numbers have been way up. So if you're listening on the podcast, we thank and we appreciate you. I hear you. I don't see it, but I hear you. So thank you for listening. And for those on YouTube as well, thank you guys for making this one of the best Eagles podcasts on YouTube and really all over the internet. So thanks, everybody, for being here this morning. I also want to thank BetUS for sponsoring the show today. This full show is brought to you by BetUS. We'll give you more about them later. But Johnny Mac, the Thursday night game last night, another concussion for Tua Tagovailoa. I'm a fan of Tua. I actually had several classes, John, when I was at Alabama with Tua.
Oh, is that class? This is breaking news.
Yeah, I had an entrepreneurship class with Tua
I'm
and an English class with Tua, and this was before declared majors. It was in my sophomore year, so it wasn't anything. But he's really a great guy. I mean, I had one class with him that was 35 people. It wasn't like this humongous, room, and he's really a good person. I mean, I have limited interaction with him, but I'm a fan, obviously, because I'm a fan of Alabama football. But even taking off the Bama colored glasses, you feel for the player. It's 4 concussions now for him. What do you think of what's going on there?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly, and I think the concussion issue is very disingenuous. I talk about that all the time. I think it's such a they're still in the very early stages of the research needed to explain the effects on certain people and how it differs from person to person and how multiple concussions increase issues, and still very early in all that research, and everybody makes grandiose claims, and the people and individuals are different how they handle it. Some people, they get one concussion and they're not able to recover. So I don't like the discussion around it, and you see so many people saying, well, he can never play again. Well, I'm going to leave that up to the doctors. But it is serious, obviously, from the standpoint of how many concussions he's had.
Yeah.
And from the Dolphins standpoint, there is that PR aspect of, like, they can't put him on the field even if he's cleared, because you're going to have this groundswell of people who think they're experts but not are experts. Oh, you can't put him back on the field. And that's what happened last time he went through this. So it's a very difficult situation. That's one of the things that complicated his contract, which he ultimately got. But the Dolphins knew these issues could rise up again, and you're talking about paying a guy $50 million. So number one, you hope he's okay from a personal standpoint. He's got to leave the game. He's got to leave the game. From a football standpoint, I never thought he was a $50 million quarterback. I'm not going to change that because he got hurt. But it's a very difficult situation from the Dolphins from a football perspective as well. But first and foremost, obviously, is his health.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So we'll see what ends up happening with there. I'll tell you what, Johnny Mac, about that coach, Mike McDaniel. Say what you want about him. You can like him, you can dislike him. I understand why players like playing for him, because whether he's right or he's wrong, or you agree with him or you disagree with him, he seems to really have his players' backs. Even with the Tyreek situation last week, with the Tua stuff, he's thinking of the human being, is what his comment was after the game. I see why players like playing for him, and I don't know what you guys think of the coach. I think he's a pretty good offensive mind, but players
Well, he's a
like
very
playing
good
for him.
offensive mind. I don't
Yeah,
think there's any question. As a head coach, the jury's still out.
yeah,
But yeah, players definitely like him.
yeah.
And
Well, he's
there's
got their back. He's always got their back.
yeah, and there's player. I mean, a perfect example was Vic Fangio. Vic wasn't a fit down there because Vic goes about things a little bit differently.
Yeah,
And I don't know if it's everybody calls it old school. I prefer Vic's method. Uh, really, really than anyone's. Like I prefer honesty.
yeah.
But there aren't a lot of Vic Fangios left. There's more Mike McDaniels.
Yeah, no, you're
So
right.
he's a very good offensive coach. Is he going to be a good head coach? He's good. Is he going to be a great head coach? Is he going to be a long-term head coach? I mean, he's had them over 500 and in playoffs, I believe. Yeah, 2 consecutive years. So, he's 2 for 2. He's got him, but I don't look at that team. I kind of said it yesterday. I don't look at that team as a legitimate Super Bowl team. There's a toughness lacking. I said that on yesterday's show, and you saw it show up. I mean, I picked Miami to win that game, and they got destroyed.
Yeah, they did.
By a Buffalo team that's a little bit in a rebuilding mode and's got a ton of injuries on defense, and they got destroyed. So yeah, I think
you want to beat Miami, be physical.
Yeah. And does that stem from the top? Maybe. And they sure didn't like Vic, a bunch of them. And I haven't heard complaints about Vic here yet. Now, if you lose, everybody's going to complain. But they weren't losing last year. They were a good team. Won 11 games. They weren't losing, and they still had a problem with tough coaching. So, yeah, I think not everybody, obviously. Andrew Van Ginkel didn't have a problem with it, for instance, but Jalen Ramsey, number of the D-backs complained about it. So, yeah, I would say the jury's still out.
Yeah, we'll see what ends up happening with the Miami Dolphins, with Mike McDaniel, and with Tua. Prayers up to Tua, that hopefully he is as healthy as he can be. You're thinking of the player first, as Johnny Mac mentioned. One more thought on last night's game, John. Josh Allen can play. I know we knew that, but I mean, he didn't even have his best game last night. But there's some plays that he makes that you're just like, holy cow, man! He is an unbelievable football player.
Yeah, if he could somehow temper the recklessness of his game with, which is very difficult to do. We see it with Jalen Hurts to a lesser degree all the time. But yeah, he's special. I mean, yeah, he can do things that nobody else can do. But he turns it over. He's willing to take chances, and they haven't gotten over the top. So ultimately, he's in a similar situation as Lamar Jackson. It's not necessarily fair, but he's done everything you need to do in the regular season. Now it's about the playoffs. And by the way, even in the playoffs, it's not his fault that Sean McDermott can't navigate 13 seconds. And who knows, if they're in the Super Bowl, they might win the Super Bowl. That's not his fault. He had one of the great games that people still talk about. They changed rules because of that game.
That game is unbelievable.
And he did everything humanly possible to put the Bills over the top. So, yeah, he's proven everything he needs to prove to people in the industry. Like, everybody knows how good he is. But to the general public, until you get that Super Bowl, they're going to talk all that nonsense You can't win the big game.
That game, John, that game was one of the game you're talking about, that playoff game versus Chiefs. That was one of the best games I think I've seen in the last 10 years. That game was
Yeah, sorry, it's arguably the best modern game.
Yeah. I mean, that game was unbelievable. Gabe
Yeah.
Davis had 4 touchdowns in that game. That game was unbelievable.
Yeah, and that was on Sean McDermott, man. I mean, you can't handle that situation worse. I'm surprised he survived that, to be honest. And he's a good coach, but yeah, that was a disaster. Had nothing to do with Josh Allen.
Yeah, no. Let's move in, John, to the Eagles game. We got that Monday night game coming up. Week 2, everybody. Falcons are coming to Philly. Finally, our real home opener. Last week it was a home game, and we traveled 4,000 miles for a damn home game, giving away up our Lincoln Financial advantage that our stadium brings us with our incredible Eagles fans. But we are back home this week, and then we won't be home for about a month, Johnny Mac. They don't come home, I think, until October 13th or somewhere in there after the bye week. So they're going to want to take advantage of this one. We'll start with the offensive side of the ball for the Eagles, John, and their approach to this game. What if you're Kellen Moore, if you're Jalen Hurts coming into this game, what are you trying to do to dissect this Atlanta defense? They do have a couple good players. They got a defensive secondary. They got 2 great safeties. They do have a good cornerback as well. So they got some good players in the secondary. If you're attacking this Atlanta defense, what's your first couple priorities?
Well, I think the Eagles are looking internally this week, and by that I mean, and Nick Sirianni pointed this out yesterday. So send all the hate mail to Nick Sirianni today. Unsustainable is what he said. The turnovers.
Good to hear him say that.
Yeah. I mean, they were the only team in the NFL, if you heard him talk yesterday, that won losing the turnover. The only team in the NFL. And Jalen Hurts spoke after practice and said, took accountability, owned his 2 terrible decisions, should have owned 4 terrible decisions. Yeah, it wasn't good. And if you keep doing that, and Nick plainly said it, you're not going to win. So I think it's internal this week more than anything, clean operation, as Kellen Moore will say it, and Cam Jurgens and Jalen Hurts as well. Cleaner operation, and I think the rest takes care of itself. But yeah, Atlanta's got some talent on defense, and it starts with Grady Jarrett up front. And it's going to be interesting to see how they handle a player like that on a. You had a player like that on paper last week in Green Bay, but it didn't matter because of the field. So there's going to be good and bad. Now you can look at the Eagles defense and give them and judge them a little bit better. But now you have to look at, all right, Mekhi Becton, is he really a right guard? I think you'll get a better indication of that this week, because I think Atlanta will try to match up Grady Jarrett on him as much as possible. They got Matthew Judon late in the process. They've been looking for a pass rusher for a long time. They finally got one. They have good players at all 3 levels. Caden Ellis is one of the best linebackers in the NFL that people probably don't realize. Brother of Christian Ellis. So he's on the 2nd level, and then in the secondary, you mentioned people know Justin Simmons. Jesse Bates is arguably the best safety in football. He's the bigger deal. Jalen was talking about him a little bit.
Yeah, he's a great player.
Yeah, he's, people are talking about him as a game wrecker in the secondary, which you don't often hear about. So he's really good. Justin Simmons is a playmaker. AJ Terrell, Jalen mentioned him, very good cornerback, is back from an injury. So yeah, they got some talent. It'll be a test, but same thing from the Atlanta side. And Raheem Morris was talking about it. So because of what went on last week, Raheem got the question about Saquon Barkley, and he immediately turned towards the entire encompassing of the playmakers and said, look, man, it's not just about stopping him. You got to worry about Slim Reaper, as he called him, which people do, Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, Dallas Goedert, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, and that's a defensive-minded coach. And for as disappointing as week 1 was for The Falcons favorite over Pittsburgh with Justin Fields playing quarterback, and they weren't able to win the game. It was basically all offensive. The Steelers didn't score a touchdown. They had 6 field goals from Chris Boswell, and 3 of them were over 50 yards. So they did a good job defensively. And they have a good defense. And this will be a bigger test for strength versus strength, basically, because the Eagles should have a good offense. But if they turn it over like they did, they're in trouble this week. Or it's going to be like a tight Pittsburgh-Atlanta game if the Atlanta offense can't get going at all, which is a possibility because Kirk Cousins doesn't seem healthy. But if they turn it over like they did against Green Bay, there's going to be some issues this week.
Yeah, 9 interceptions between those two safeties last year for the two players. They were on different teams, but they are ball hawks. John, is Atlanta running that Tampa 2 defense? That's what we talked about a little bit yesterday on the National Football Show. Is that what they're running?
No, Raheem's got a long history, but he was brought in to the Rams to do more of a Vic style defense. So he's multiple.
Okay, so he's going to have.
He's got a history in Tampa too. He's got a history doing that. And they use the same base as the Eagles, so they'll do the whole 5-man, 4-man front, with Judon as the overhang player. With I think they're using Lorenzo Carter, so they probably aren't where they need to be with that second edge rusher, and then the 2 off-ball linebackers. So I would say he's got a history with both, but they lean more towards how Vic plays than classic Tampa 2. But they'll run it occasionally. But so will Vic.
Yeah. So the different looks on the defense. We'll see how Jalen Hurts and Kellen Moore try and carve them up. John, another good matchup from the standpoint going into this game is AJ Terrell on AJ Brown. Now they both got paid big money this offseason. AJ Terrell is a pretty damn good corner, but he did get picked on a little bit in week 1. He gave up, I think, 3 catches for 61 yards, missed a couple tackles. So we're going to see how he fares against AJ Brown. I know Kellen will move him around, and he probably won't be on AJ every play. But when you talk about CB1 and wide receiver 1, those are your top 2 guys. What do you think of the matchup between AJ Terrell, AJ Brown, and really just the whole Eagles wide receiving corps?
Well, I always like the Eagles' advantage because of AJ and Devontae as a tandem. And, they're very good, but they were. I'm just looking, not that it's a very small sample size, but they were 5th in pass defense after week 1. Now a lot of that had to do with you're just playing a terrible quarterback, but
yeah.
So that factors into it as well. But they had a good week as far as it came to shutting down the passing game. You don't know how much is real. To me, it's not about AJ. It's about Mike Hughes and D. Alford, who's their slot corner. And are they going to be D. Alford, can he match up with Devontae Smith in the slot? I don't think so. So yeah, I would say that's advantage. It's always, you're going to have advantage Eagles, basically 17 for 17 with those 2.
Yeah, so we'll see what ends up happening there. That's a good matchup though with that. Just the whole secondary of the Falcons team is pretty good when you talk about those 2 safeties, Bates and Simmons. Then you have AJ Terrell. They got a lot of guys back there. It'll be interesting to see what Raheem does to try and throw some different looks to take away the Eagles playmakers. And then John, let's talk Saquon Barkley. What could he do in this game? I think he could be a big factor. That Atlanta D-line, I mean, I know they have Grady Jarrett, who you've talked about extensively, but outside of that, they got Matthew Judon, right? Who's a great pass rusher, but could this be a Saquon day?
Well, I mean, Sure, it could be.
Any day could be, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's the beauty of the Eagles offense at this stage, and that's what Kellen's talking about. All right, if you're going to try to take away, you almost need to be in the head of Raheem Morris. What is he going to try to take away? Because you can't take away everything, and you're basically saying, all right, make this guy beat me rather than this guy beat me. Is basically what you're trying to do. And it would be just speculation. But when he was asked, because Saquon's offensive player of the week, the 3 touchdowns. So when he was asked specifically about him, he specifically went to Devontae and AJ first. I don't know if that's a hint, but it might be. Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean,
I think the Falcons match up. I agree that they're the better, that they're who you have to take away first, and it's a tall task to do that for anybody, no matter how good your secondary is. But I do think the Atlanta defense matches up a little better with the wide receivers than they do with the running game, because I don't think their linebackers and their defensive line is.
Caden Ellis is very good, very good.
Is that their starting linebacker or Mike?
Yeah. Well, they're basically interchangeable. I think he's their weak side linebacker, but he's out there. He played every defensive snap. So, I haven't looked to see who wears the green dot. I assume it's him. He plays the most, so it would make the most sense. And he's a very good player. Very good player. So I wouldn't, I don't say any, is he a Roquan Smith type that's going to be big and physical and that type of thing? No, probably not to that stage, but yeah, he's very athletic, very quick, and they rotate at the other spot. So the other spot is the issue. Troy Anderson last week and Nate Landman, who played pretty well, both of them. But again, is that more to do with Justin Fields? I don't know. But I think they're better at linebacker than people realize. Yeah. So I don't think it's going to be a run over because the Falcons have bad linebackers. I think Caden's very good, and those guys are a little bit more unproven, but they played well in week 1, at least. And they're the bigger guys. So they're the bigger, more physical guys. Anderson's like 240. So they would be the traditional Mikes, but, Caden plays every snap. So it's one of those things where he's probably got the green dot.
Let's just go to that offensive line that, for the Eagles, as we're talking about how the Eagles should attack this game offensively. You talked a little bit already about Grady Jarrett versus going up against Mekhi Becton. It'll be interesting to see how Mekhi fares against him. But we talked about Matthew Judon as well. He's a guy that could, if able, he could wreck a game, or he could, severely alter your offensive plans. I think it's going to be on Jordan Mailata to keep him out of the backfield. What do you think of that matchup?
Yeah, I like the Eagles. Same thing with the receivers. I'm always picking the Eagles when it comes to edge rushers. Even when it's Micah Parsons, I'll pick the Eagles. Not that they won't give a bunch of extra attention to Micah, but yeah, Lane Johnson, Jordan Mailata, that's a luxury.
Yeah.
Not many teams have that luxury. Detroit, Minnesota, Cleveland, when they're healthy, they didn't have their starting tackles, but when Wills is there and Conklin, Minnesota's got Darisaw and O'Neal. Detroit's got Sewell and Decker, and then the Eagles. Those are the best tackle duos in the NFL. And the Eagles are probably number 1, I would say. Maybe you could argue Detroit, certainly after week 1, but and I think Penei Sewell's the best of them all. But yeah, they're I don't worry about Matthew Judon at all.
The luxury of having Jordan Mailata and Lane Johnson. The Eagles have had that for a little bit now with Lane Johnson, and now they have it with Jordan Mailata. They had it before Jordan Mailata too, with some good tackle play. But Jordan Mailata is a new level. He is still, John, an unbelievable story to think about how good he is at that position. And when he started playing this game, it's really unbelievable to think about what a great gifted athlete he is, man.
Oh, he's gifted at everything. He sings
Yeah.
like an angel.
I know.
He's got a tremendous person. Yesterday, I walked in the locker room. He's singing Hall and Oates like he's Daryl Hall.
Oh,
I mean, he's per old school people know who that is, but
no, I even know who that is.
Tremendous voice. Yeah, everything he does, it's annoying. Everything he does, he's good at. Playing the ukulele. He picked up the ukulele. I'm like, yeah, how long you been playing that? Oh, I just started. I'm like, it's ridiculous.
Shout out to Jordan Mailata. Good stuff, man. God, he's got gifted talents from God. So good stuff for Jordan Mailata. John, we got a super chat here. Any super chats that come here after the break, I will take as well. We have Thomas Mott, by the way, for those just checking in, coming up in hour number 2. So we'll talk to Thomas in hour number 2. Looking forward to that. Matthew Halpin checks in. Johnny Mac, giving a little love to you here this morning. Appreciate it, Matthew. He says, JM, I listen to most of the press conferences, and you ask the best and most articulate questions, in my opinion. Matthew, I'll second that, and I will agree. Johnny Mac, a little love for you on this morning. Thank you, Matthew.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I know the team appreciates it. I know they give the coaches scouting reports on the questions because some of them can get rather jaded. So I get generally good scouting reports. But yeah, I always say I try to. To me, it's not really valuable when you have coach speak coaches. Like with Vic, it's easy because you can ask Vic direct questions,
right?
And he's going to answer it. So you can ask him, "Hey, how's the Kobe Dean playing, and how's Bryce up on?" And you get an answer. Everybody else, that's a waste of a question. I'm just being honest. It's a waste.
Right. So how do you, as a reporter, as a guy that, prides themselves on the objectivity, and as Matthew points out, your articulate questioning, how do you approach like a guy like Kellen Moore, where in order to get anything, you kind of have to do something a little bit different, or is it kind of chalked up to luck? He's going to play the politics. You're not going to get much.
No, you can, and that's why I try to be thematic about it more than, what, like this week, the turnovers and the decision making was a big part of the issue. Is so, and even when I was talking to Jalen, you frame it in a way where you talk about it in a general sense rather than a specific sense, and you generally are going to get a better answer. In the case of Kellen, he used to play the position, so it's kind of easy to ask about decision making, and I kind of frame it and as a former quarterback type thing. How do you handle this situation? How do you handle that situation? And you might not get the greatest answer because Kellen's smart and he knows to be political, but you generally get a better answer. And the same with Nick. If you ask, you might get I asked him about the schedules yesterday, and because it's crazy going to Brazil, then you got a mini bye, then you're on a short week,
right?
And they don't have a real schedule until a traditional NFL schedule till week 4. And I got a pretty good answer from him. So that's what I try to do. But
John, do you think from that perspective, what you just talked about right there with the schedule, do you think the early bye week is going to help with that? Because coming out of the bye week, that's when they have really 6 straight Sunday games, 6 straight Sunday games. So, 1 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 1 o'clock. Well, no, after the bye, you got 1, 4:25, 8:20, a night game. I think it's Sunday Night Football versus the Jags, or that might be. Yeah, it's Sunday Night Football. And then 4:25 again. So you kind of can get back into your schedule coming out of the bye. You think from that perspective, the bye will help the Eagles?
I never like an early bye, no matter what, because to me, the bye is more about, getting a little bit of rest for the players, and you're not going to be as banged up early as you are late. That's just the nature of football. So I never like early buys, period. End of sentence.
How about a silver lining, though, John?
Yeah, if you're looking for a silver lining, that's where I was going. Yeah, maybe. But I don't think it over. The most important part of a bye is the rest for the players, and you don't need it as much this early in the season. So everybody kind of doesn't like the early bye, and the Eagles are no different. But yeah, I mean the Friday night game, and even Nick mentioned when I asked him that, he went, we've been doing that for years, blah blah blah, but he said we've never gone to Brazil before, so that was new, that was different, and he mentioned it worked out. That's all that matters, and that's true. You get out of there with a win, but yeah, these schedules have been unique and difficult, and maybe that's a little bit of advantage of being a CEO coach that is no longer in the offensive meetings all the time. Maybe it gives him a better chance to handle that, and we'll see how it shakes out, because now you got a mini bye, and now you didn't get back with the players, and you want to correct things, and I don't even know if you know what to correct, because the field was so bad. And by the way, I talked to a bunch of players about the field yesterday. Yeah, it was Britton Covey said it was way worse than the Super Bowl. I mean, it was atrocious. Vontae called it terrible. To Bryce Huff's credit, because Bryce in the building, Bryce and everybody else on the front has been given a mulligan. Sorry, I'm going to use that term, but like everybody knows. But he didn't use it as an excuse, which I thought was a positive.
Good stuff there. We'll see how it all develops going into the rest of the season here. Week 2 coming up. Super chat here. Dallas have a tough A. Written King. I don't know what you mean. You might have hit enter by accident. Dallas has a tough schedule or a tough what? I'm going to get to a break, but I will hit your comment after if I see it coming in. Thanks, everybody, for being here this morning. Before I get to our commercial break, I want to tell you a little bit about BetUS. They have recently upgraded their promotion for all of our viewers here on JAKIB Sports. Go to betus.com.pa. Use the code YouTube 150. You know what that 150 means? It's 150% now sign-up bonus, up to $2,000 in your first 3 deposits. So you can deposit less and get more now with their 150% sign-up bonus. So great stuff from BetUS. Make sure you go to BetUS. They have the fastest payouts in the industry. They have 24/7 customer support, and they will even give you your own custom account manager. So get on BetUS today. I know one of our men, I think it was Callie, I think you got on BetUS already. You asked me for the code. So you use the code YouTube150, get on BetUS. Let's start taking those prop bets on BetUS. So Saquon Barkley, I think I'm taking the over, everybody, on Saquon Barkley in week 2, which would mean another jersey is coming for our members. So thanks to all of our members in the chat. Appreciate everybody. Go to betus.com.pa. That's betus.com.pa. Birds 365 will be right back. Stay tuned, everybody.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
He's blocked well and tries to cut through the middle. Oh!
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on Sports Grid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on Sports Grid.
Score and save in southeastern PA and Delaware with Colony Pools this football season, and let the experts close your pool with a custom Merlin safety cover in green for the birds. And if you join our Winter Watch team, we'll give you another 20% off, and Colony Pools will handle it all. Keep your tiles on your pool, not in your pool. Fly with Colony right now, birds fans. Visit flywithcolony.com.
Hi everybody, my name's Jason Lombardi. I'm an inspector at DryTech. At DryTech we offer 3 major services, the first one being basement waterproofing. The second service we offer is foundation and structural repairs. And then the third service that we offer is mold remediation. If you feel you are having a waterproofing issue, give DryTech a call or check us out online.
Heading down the shore, have a ball once more.
Here, imaginations run wild and time stands still. Because here, you can find the best of the Jersey Shore, all on one 5-mile island. So leave the old you behind and get lost in the woods.
Wild, wild, wildwood day.
Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody, to a Football Friday edition of Birds 365. Last Football Friday, Johnny Mac, we had a game to prepare for.
Yeah.
This Football Friday, we got to wait until Monday. So I hope everybody enjoys the weekend of football, the college tomorrow and tonight, and then the NFL on Sunday. You guys will have an open day, not worried about your Philadelphia Eagles until Monday night. There's both good and bad to that. I'd rather be playing on Sunday because that is my dedicated day for football. I love a football Sunday. So we will have to wait till Monday night, though. Johnny Mac, we're about to dive in. For those who have just tuned in, we're about to dive into the Eagles' defensive approach to stopping the Falcons. I think this could be a feast day for the Eagles' defense, depending on how they play it. But a couple things I want to get to before we get to that. James Carver leaves us a big super chat. James, thank you, brother. J Mac. He says 2 personal questions. Let's see, man. What do you grill on days you get to really watch football in general, like last and this weekend? That's a good one. You want to answer that before I go?
Well, I don't grill on football days. Yeah, that, which is an issue, believe me. Yeah, I got to watch football. So, yeah, I don't have time.
You don't get up before the 1 o'clock game start and get out on the grill,
No.
Johnny Mac. What kind of grill are you using, Johnny Mac? You got a Blackstone, you got a Weber. What are you using?
I do have a Weber, but yeah, I mean, and in fact, I generally cook a bunch at once because my wife likes to make salads when she goes into work and put chicken on them. So I generally do a bunch of stuff at once, and she asked me to do it this way. And I'm like, I got to watch football. So yeah, you brought up a sore spot.
Oh man, Johnny Mac's got to keep it quiet in the house talking about that.
Yeah. And I had 4 Eagles to fill out the dinner table. Boy. Well, nothing against the Eagles, but if I'm inviting people to dinner, it's probably not the Eagles. But if I was forced to, and they would say the same thing, I get to spend too much time with them.
Is James talking about current Eagles, or is he talking about?
I think he's talking about color because of
current
Mailata.
Eagles. We'll go current Eagles because
definitely Mailata would be one of them. No question. Britton would be one of them. Britton Covey would definitely be one of them. Lane would be one of them because he is tremendously entertaining as well as very insightful. And then I go with Jalen Hurts because I want to see his guard down a little bit.
Yeah,
still guarded. But yeah, and Kelsey obviously would have been easy, but he's no longer here.
Yeah, Takeem puts who I would have went with. I would have went with Brandon Graham in there.
Yeah, you're probably right. Yeah, BG's freaking hilarious. So
BG is great, man.
Maybe I can fit an extra chair in there. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a bad job by me.
I'm gonna give you my 4. I think I'd go Brandon Graham. I think I'd go AJ Brown, John. I am fascinated by AJ Brown. To me, and I saw something on my Twitter yesterday about from AJ Brown, and it was when he was with the Titans, but it was suicide or September, excuse me, is National Suicide Awareness Month. And AJ spoke very candidly about that back when he was with the Titans. And I just think he's a deep guy. I think there's so much more to AJ than meets the surface. So I'd probably go AJ Brown. I'm fascinated by him. I think he's a great football player, but he really seems to be a great person as well. So I'd take AJ Brown, Brandon Graham. I'd probably go Saquon. I'd probably go Saquon. He's got roots in the area. I think I'd take Saquon. And to close it out, who can I go to close it out? Give me, what do I have? I have BG.
I immediately went entertainment based, which is
Yeah.
probably more emphasis on it because I love AJ. AJ would be good, but I'm thinking like Jordan's going to entertain me.
Smitty's a good one. I could close mine out with Smitty.
Yeah, BG's going to entertain me. I should have said. Now people ask me who my favorite Eagles are all the time, and I joke. I take a picture of Noah or what's the other Eagle they bring for training camp? Reggie, I think. Or Reggie the dog, who was the team dog. Those are my favorite Eagles. But people-wise, I always joke it's Glenn Pry, Don Henley, Joe Walsh, and then I joke Brandon Graham. I will say Brandon because Brandon's like the best person in the world.
Yeah, he really is. He is behind the scenes too. I've talked to him many times behind the scenes. He's really a great.
I don't root for the Eagles, which upsets people sometimes, but I root for people. I root for people I like.
That shouldn't upset anybody. That's the reason this show is so good, because you're an objective analyst of the team. You call it how you see it, the good, the bad, the ugly, and I really think that's what makes this show so good. So I don't think that should upset anybody.
Yeah, and I think it's natural. I mean, once you get to know people and they're good people, you naturally root for
yeah, right. That's human psychology, man. You root
Yeah.
for people. Yeah.
So it's easy to root for individuals. But yeah, I mean, I generally don't have favorite Eagles. I have favorite people on the Eagles. And that's why I say Glenn Fry and Don Henley.
Good question, James Carver. Thanks for doing that. A little bit of off subject, but it was a lot of fun to do it. I see everybody in the chat. A lot of people put some good stuff up. I think I'd close mine out with Smitty. That's what I would do. So I had Brandon Graham, I had AJ Brown, I had Smitty, and Saquon Barkley would be my 4. So a good 4 there. Johnny Max was a good 4 as well. So good question there. James Carver, thanks for doing that, man. A little bit of off subject, but it's nice to get deeper. We talk 10 hours a week on this football team. It's good to spend 10 minutes, doing some other stuff. So thanks, James, for that. John, let's get back into the game here from a defensive approach. Like I said before the break, I think this could be a feast day for the Eagles defense if that defensive line shows up coming into this game. What's your approach from a defensive standpoint to slow down Kirk Cousins and this offense? They do have a lot of weapons.
Yeah, it's all about Bijan. I mean, it's it's all about Bijan. Back to Bijan 365 because the Falcons can say what they want, and they all claim that Kirk Cousins is healthy. He's not healthy. He certainly wasn't. He certainly was restricted last week. He's a play action quarterback. He didn't play under center. Because he couldn't take the snap and push off and hand off, never mind throw the ball. So, Nick Sirianni brought up a good point and said, sometimes when you go through that and that type of rehab and that type of significant rehab, especially when you're older, when Kirk's 36, I believe, sometimes you have good days and sometimes you have the bad days. And you're not feeling as good. And sometimes you feel great. And, maybe he felt bad on Sunday and maybe of last week and maybe on Monday of next week, he feels great and you got to deal with it. But until I see it, I find it very hard to believe the guy that was out there last week is going to be throwing for his typical 300 plus yards. Last game here, we were talking about it. So he threw for 364 yards and 4 touchdowns and a 125.6 passer rating. So the Eagles won the game, but they had some issues stopping him throwing the football. That was pre-Achilles injury. That guy wasn't there last week. So, number one, the hope is from the Eagles standpoint that he's not completely healthy because he did not look good against Pittsburgh. Now, Pittsburgh also has TJ Watt. The Eagles aren't getting TJ Watt this week, and he wrecked that game. But Bijan is the guy, I would be, he's number one, and everybody else, it's like, who cares at this point? So everything is, I would imagine, starts with Bijan Robinson this week.
Yeah, no doubt. I saw a video that floating around of Kirk at practice yesterday. I think it was Kurt Benkert or somebody who put it up. Kurt Benkert put it up. He does not look like he is moving good, John. I don't know if it's just a lack of confidence or he's just not healthy yet. He does not look like he can move on that leg, and it really takes away a big part of Kirk Cousins' game where he rolls out, he does the play action. There's a lot of stuff that Kirk thrives on that require him. He's not a running quarterback, but it does require him to move, to have some mobility in the pocket. Doesn't seem like he has it. He could be a sitting duck, as we've talked about this week, and really could get beat up on if he can't move well.
Yeah, and Vic got asked about Michael Penix, if he's got to prepare for him, and it's like they're not concerned about that, probably because of how much the Falcons paid Kirk Cousins. To be honest, it's going to be very difficult to go away from him. And it's more of, you got to prepare for the guy he was than the guy he seems to be, and that's how the Eagles will approach it, I'm sure. But then you were just talking about human nature. There's a human nature aspect of it, that they're watching the film and they're saying to themselves, well, this guy's not healthy, and that's what Nick was trying to curtail, I think, a little bit with explaining the rehab process, and whether it's a torn ACL, torn Achilles like he suffered, which was in week 8 last season. And by the way, he was having his best season. He was completing 70% of his passes. This is week 8, so it's not even halfway through the season. And they were killing Green Bay, and Green Bay is completing 70% of his passes, 2,300 yards already, 18 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. I mean, they were going to make the playoffs, and the Packers weren't. If he were healthy for 17 games. No, quite. I mean, they're a playoff team. He was playing really well. That guy didn't show up last week.
No, he definitely didn't. So, we're going to see how it looks this week, no doubt, because that pass rush, I think, is the key to the game. We talked about not Saquon. We talked about Bijan Robinson and taking him out of the game, but I think that this week is a chance for everybody's talked about that they were non-existent last week, the pass rush. This is their week, baby. They could really blow this game up if the defensive line of the Eagles shows up. What do you think of that matchup? And Kirk Cousins might be seeing shadows all night if the pass rush shows up.
Yeah, interesting matchup, because I do think the Falcons, again, have a pretty good offensive line. I don't think it's great like the Eagles, but it's pretty good. Right side, I think, is very good. With Chris Lindstrom and Caleb McGarry. I think McGarry's a little bit, he was on the injury report, so he's a little bit banged up, so maybe that helps. Jake Matthews, the Matthews family, they're just good. And then they're a little bit weaker on the interior, so maybe it's a Jalen Carter game. You really need to see something from Bryce Up and Nolan Smith.
Who's the tackle who's going up against? McGarry?
McGarry's the right tackle. Matthews is the left tackle. They're both pretty good.
Yeah, they are.
They're certainly a top 10. We were talking about tandems. They're a top 10 tandem. I wouldn't put them in the the group I mentioned. But I was looking at Huff yesterday because I wrote about Huff because I was talking to him. I mean, I got a
I read your article on Huff. Yeah,
he had 68 pressures last year and 21 quarterback hits
and 10 sacks.
I mean, I find it very hard to believe that guy can't rush the passer.
And he had a top 3 pass rush win rate in the NFL, behind guys like I think Micah Parsons and T.J. Watt. Or
and one, I forget which one because all those things are subjective a little bit, but they're close. I mean, one of them had him number 1. Yeah. I think it was Next Gen Stats had him number 1, or it might have been vice versa. It might have been PFF, but one of them had him number 1 in the entire league, pressure percentage, whatever you want to call it. And the other one had him number 3. Either or, that's fine. I find it very hard to believe this guy just forgot how to rush the passer because he changed teams or because he got a bigger check. But he's got to show it. And I thought he'd show it in Brazil, but he couldn't show it in Brazil, which I hope people realize, but they don't seem to realize that.
Falcons have 2 guards, Johnny Mac. One of them is good. One of them is not so good. Lindstrom is pretty good, but Bergeron is the other one. Could it be a Jalen Carter day if they get him lined up against him?
Yeah, I mentioned Jalen. Yeah, it should be a Jalen Carter day. And he didn't play well in Brazil for obvious reasons. So, I mean, yeah, the Eagles got to get it going. Yeah, I mean, Jalen Carter's got to be the best defensive player on this team.
Yeah, he does. And
it wasn't that way in week 1, which it didn't matter because Zach Bond came out of nowhere. And Reed played very well. Reed Blankenship as well. But ultimately, long term, yeah, Jalen Carter's got to be the guy. And yeah, Bergeron is not good, especially, and he's worse as a pass blocker than he is as a run blocker. So, I mean, that should be tailor-made for Jalen Carter. And then you add on top of it, the quarterback can't move. So there's no reason. There will be no more mulligans on Tuesday on this program. If this defensive front doesn't show up in this game, it's time to start being concerned.
You heard it here first, everybody, on Friday's edition. No more mulligans. Callie, baby, that one's for you. No more mulligans, brother. So let's get our super chat, John. We got a good super chat. And Chip, thanks for doing the super chat because I did want to talk about Devin White and his comments yesterday. Chip Tooth checks in, one of our best viewers. Chip, thanks for being here, brother. We appreciate the support. He says, John, since no one else has stepped up, I will be the first to apologize for you being right about Nakobe.
That is the first. Congrats. You are the first.
I agreed with you. I still feel like you're owed an apology. Does 45 play at all? Speaking about Devin White. Chip, thanks for the Superman. Johnny Mac, what do you have to say?
No, not on defense, barring injury, of course. No, he's not going to play. The linebackers are Nakobe Dean and Zach Bond. And that doesn't mean they won't need him at some point, which is how everyone is spinning it. And it's probably right. Nakobe has a history of injuries last year, so you have to worry about that. Zach is not used to playing as many snaps as he played. So will they need him at some point? Yes, probably. But if those guys are healthy, if it turns into a TJ Edwards, Kaiser White situation, those guys aren't leaving the field. So there's no room for the third linebacker, but I assume you're talking about a rotational thing or getting that. No, it's not in the mix. And it's fine. I don't think, and by the way, Devin's very professional. I don't know where.
Yeah, I thought he handled it well.
He handled it very well. And I said that right away. I said he doesn't strike me as the guy that's going to be an issue. And hopefully that's the case. But yeah, it's the nature of the NFL, and that's how big it is. Jakobi won the job, and that's where it is right now.
I do understand from Devin's perspective, though, like, he got so many first team reps. Like, I get it. He didn't win the job. He was given every opportunity to win it. But, like, as a player, when I just try and put myself in his shoes, I would be like, what the fuck, man? So I don't know.
Yeah, but it was, but as a player, I get it from Devin's perspective. I mean, he's like, you got to have confidence in yourself. If you're not going to believe in yourself, who's going to believe in you? So from his standpoint, he's taken, like, I don't think anybody noticed, not anybody. There's a bunch of us that noticed, but there's a bunch of people that didn't notice that while the first rep didn't change, and it was Devin White and Zach Bond for, I believe they had 16 practices open to the media in its entirety. For 15 of the 16 practices, those were the first two on the field. So they took the first rep. By the last week of camp, they were rotating so much. I think everybody shut their notebook. Again, not everybody. DeCecco's one of them. Few of them. Jakobi's getting more first team reps. So if you're not paying attention to the entirety of the practice and you just say, oh, he's the starter, I always go back as an old school basketball guy, the last Sixers championship team, which was 1983. How many years ago was that, by the way? That's sad.
A lot.
1983. Mark Ivoroni was the starter. Back then, it was more structured, power forward. Bobby Jones was the backup. Bobby Jones is in the Hall of Fame, for those who don't know old school basketball. Bobby Jones played more minutes. Bobby Jones finished. Bobby Jones played in the key spots. So just because he was out there the first snap, Jakobi had overtaken him by the final week, and it was pretty clear. And as Vic said when he was talking about competition, it will become obvious. It was obvious to people who were paying attention.
Good stuff, Chip, too. Thank you for the super chat. Johnny Mac got a lot of hate this summer, saying he didn't think Devin White was going to be what people expected him to be. So I appreciate the apology for Johnny Mac. Chip, too. Appreciate you being here, brother. John, a couple more super chats to get to, and then we'll get to our man Thomas Mott in hour number 2 here, coming up at 9:20. So just 14 minutes till we get to Thomas. Dirty Air says, completely fantasy hypothetical. Is there anything of value on the Dolphins worth trying to shop Kenny Pickett to them for?
Where are they?
Edge,
No,
draft
the Eagles.
capital?
The Eagles are not trading Kenny Pickett. Now, if the Dolphins wake up and say, we're going to give you a first-round pick for Kenny Pickett, maybe that changes. But Kenny Pickett was
they
brought
better
here.
get that deal, John.
Yeah, well, they would. But
Yeah.
I'm saying
They're not going to give him a first.
No. The Eagles brought Kenny Pickett here to be the backup quarterback, not only for this year, but the cost-effective nature of being on this rookie deal. Because the backup quarterback market has gotten pretty expensive for very little return. I use Marcus Mariota as an example of that. He basically did nothing here and got a raise to go to Washington. And the Eagles saw the opportunity to get a player they liked and have him locked up for a couple years, very similar to what they did with Gardner Minshew, and then he probably leaves. But no, they're not trading Kenny Pickett other than if Miami loses their senses and turns in. And by the way, Rick Spielman hangs out at their facility all the time. So maybe he was the last one to lose his senses. So maybe maybe it comes to that. But
I'm
with
already
Sam,
seeing the Photoshop Brady in the Dolphins jersey pictures all over social media.
yeah. Well, and there's a bunch of guys who aren't even. I don't think Ryan Tannehill is signed yet. I believe I have to double check. So, yeah, they got to do something because I don't know. The 5 minutes I saw of Skylar Thompson were not good.
No, they were not.
So they definitely have to do something. Yeah, and Ryan Tannehill's a free agent. I would think he's number one on the list. And obviously he was top 10 pick of the Dolphins way back in early 2012. So yeah, he would I would think he would be number one. But other than Miami losing their minds and offering a first round pick, no, you're stuck with Kenny Pickett. And by the way, I think he's one of the better backup quarterbacks in this league, Kenny Pickett. And I think the Eagles are very happy with him. I think about all the bad quarterback play you saw this weekend.
There's so much. It's crazy. Even the guys who are getting paid big bucks are
And I think the second part of it is people don't realize if Kenny Pickett looking bad in preseason with second team reps and players that aren't even here, if he were forced to play, God forbid, if he were forced to play, he'd be playing with Lane Johnson and Jordan Mailata and AJ Brown and Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert and Saquon. It would be better than if he's playing with guys that aren't here anymore. I mean, so. Yeah,
that's why I'm surprised our man Niners all damn day is in the chat. That's why I'm surprised, Johnny Mac, you're so tough on Brock Purdy, all the crappy quarterback play.
I'm not tough on Brock Purdy. I'm shocked that Brock deserves all the credit in the world, but I think there's limitations, and I'm shocked about how slowly the league is going and trying to expose those limitations, shall I say. But he's proven himself to be a good quarterback. I just don't think he's a great quarterback.
That's fair.
And I might be wrong.
Yeah, we'll
he's
see.
Playing great.
He is with Shanahan and obviously everything around him.
Well, this is a good week because they're playing Minnesota this week, and that's Brian Flores. So Brian Flores is going to bring it. So this is a good week. But last year they play, I believe, San Francisco played Minnesota last year, and that might have been his worst game. So if that happens again,
I think that McCaffrey injury, John, is a little scary if you're a San Francisco fan. What was it, tendonitis or something?
Achilles tendonitis.
Yeah, that could linger. You don't want to hear that. So we'll see if McCaffrey gets back out there, John. One more super chat, just 9 minutes or 8 minutes away or so from getting our man Thomas Mott up. So James Carver checks in here with a question about Bryce Huff. He says, is there any possibility that Huff was successful in part because he was more unknown, akin to Hurts being really successful until teams started to know what he was going to do? And now Huff needs more moves to regain his numbers. James, I think it's a fair point, man. He was not a top edge rusher on that New York Jets team, so he could kind of come in on a rotational role, and he really produced in that role. Now he's a top guy. Now he's expected to produce game in and game out. Johnny Mac, what do you think of what James Carver had to say?
Well, it's kind of just what I said about Brock Purdy in a more high-profile environment. Yeah, I mean, it could be people not, paying attention, game planning, not being ready for it. The Eagles certainly got surprised by him when the Jets upset him. Now, Lane Johnson got hurt in that game, so that factored into it as well. So that could be a part of it. And certainly the expectations, if he's placing them upon himself, could be a part of it. But boy, I mean, I saw the guy play, and it was pretty electric. And I haven't seen that yet, but I do think you throw last week out. And I don't care about preseason. I just don't.
Yeah.
So if he shows up and he doesn't, and he's playing, they have good tackles with Atlanta. And if he looks like there's no juice and there's no, then I think it's time to start worrying. But I find it very hard to believe he lost that. He's not old. He's 25, 26 years old. I think people are going to be excited to see him when the shrink wrap comes off. But Sid, I admit it's speculation, but I find it very hard to believe that athleticism is gone. And he's going to give people some headaches.
What about the point about the pass rush moves, though? I think that's a fair point.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're a one-trick pony, I mean, that's the issue with I see that more with Nolan than Bryce.
Right.
I mean, Nolan Smith is just pure speed and nothing else. I don't get that feeling with Bryce.
Which isn't going to work when you have a seasoned tackle you're going against.
Yeah. So I have that concern more with Nolan Smith than Bryce Huff, but it could be both. And that would be a bad situation for the Eagles.
Sights are set on Bryce Huff this week, Johnny Mac. Week 2, Monday Night Football, back at the link. So no mulligans, no excuses on the field. So we'll see what he's able to do.
Well, who knows? Maybe the weather turns and we get another crap. Who knows? I haven't checked the weather forecast.
We'll see. Get the right cleats for some rain if you need to. John, real quick, I wanted to say this, dude. We had Sal Palantonio on last night on This Week in Pro Football, which is syndicated on JAKIB Sports with Pat Callahan. Sal does a great job. Obviously, he's been with ESPN for a long time. He was down there at Corinthians Arena. And he said,
Sao Paulo and Sao Paulo. Yeah.
Yeah, right. We joked with him that they made the game for him. But anyway, he said he was down there Thursday. He said the field looked awesome. The turf looked great. He said Friday morning they had sprinklers come up and they watered the field on Friday, midday and Friday. And he's like, I don't know if that's the full reason, but they wet the field on Friday and then everybody was slipping around out there. And Thursday, it didn't seem to be a problem at all. So I don't know. I thought that was interesting to listen to. I'm like, man, they did the ground crew.
Yeah. I mean, I was talking to Britton about that a lot yesterday and, he called it worse than the Super Bowl. And, the JJ Watt brought up, you want a different sort of environment for soccer players, football down there, but soccer players up here. And that's what you want for soccer players. You want the field to be more like that. Maybe they just didn't know, but the NFL's got to be in charge of these things. They got to explain, we don't need that. They have to be more proactive with that stuff. That's an NFL problem. And it was a disaster. And everybody knows it was all the players. Nobody's making excuses. They won the game. There's no reason to make excuses, but it's just an explanation to some points and Nick was asked about how do you evaluate. He admitted it's more difficult because it is, there's obvious reasons why certain things aren't being accomplished. And speaking to Bryce specifically, he had mentioned he felt he got off the ball well. He got to his spots well. He was beating guys to his spots, and then became the issue because you couldn't plant and you couldn't use that explosion on sort of your pass rushing setup. And it affected everybody, not just Bryce Huff, on both sides. And then you have Zach Bond. I guess the elite cleat picker. I don't know what else to say. Why did Zach Bond excel? I can't explain it. And Reed Blankenship to a certain degree as well, because Zach Bond was phenomenal. Should have been player of the week.
No doubt. The excuses are gone here going into week 2. So we'll see how they end up doing. Seth checks in, says, I'm happy to see no hip drop tackle penalties yet. Yes, Seth, you're right. And there was some hip drop tackles. So they didn't call penalties on them, but there definitely was some hip drop tackles.
Yeah, they can call a hip drop tackle if they stop calling illegal formation. Good God.
No, Johnny. Don't get Johnny Mac started on the over legislation. We'll be here till 11 a.m. But good stuff. Thanks, everybody in the chat. You guys have been tremendous, as always. Great super chats today. Coming up, Thomas Mott from the Thomas Mott Show on YouTube. You guys are most likely familiar with him. He does great work all over YouTube. So we're going to talk to Thomas Mott next. Before we get to our break, I want to tell you guys about BetUS, our newest partner here on JAKIB Sports. If you're looking for a new sports book, go to betus.com.pa. They have just upgraded their promotion for all of our YouTube listeners. So it is now YouTube 150 is the code. You can go to betus.com.pm and use that code, and you will get up to 150% sign-up bonus. So you can deposit less and get more from BetUS. They have the fastest payouts in the industry. They have 24/7 personalized customer support, and you can even get your own account manager. So go to betus.com.pa. Let's take some prop bets, everybody, on Saquon, on AJ, and on Jalen. I think they're going to have big games this week, and maybe even a prop bet on Bryce Huff. It might even be the under on Bryce Huff if you're not confident in Bryce Huff. But go to betus.com.pa. Thank you to BetUS for sponsoring this edition of Birds 365. We thank our sponsors, and we thank all of our viewers. Let's get to our commercial break. We'll be back in 3 minutes with Thomas Mott on the other side.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
He's blocked well and tries to cut through the middle. Oh!
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on Sports Grid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on Sports Grid.
Score and save at Southeastern PA and Delaware with Colony Pools this football season, and let the experts close your pool with a custom McMullen safety cover in green for the birds. And if you join our Winter Watch team, we'll give you another 20% off, and Colony Pools will handle it all. Keep your tiles on your pool, not in your pool. Fly with Colony right now, birds fans. Visit flywithcolony.com.
Hi everybody, my name's Jason Lombardi. I'm an inspector at DryTech. At DryTech we offer three major services, the first one being basement waterproofing. The second service we offer is foundation and structural repairs. And then the third service that we offer is mold remediation. If you feel you are having a waterproofing issue, give DryTech a call or check us out online.
Heading down the shore. Have a ball once more.
Here, imaginations run wild and time stands still. Because here, you can find the best of the Jersey Shore, all on one 5-mile island. So leave the old you behind and get lost in the woods.
Wild, wild, wildwood day.
Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody, to a Football Friday edition of Birds 365. Joined now by Thomas Mott, host of the Thomas Mott Show on YouTube. You guys probably have seen his work, and at Real Thomas Mott on X. Thomas, welcome to the show, man. Thanks for being here on this Football Friday.
Football Friday. Great to be back, guys. And it's nice to be 1-0 after 1 week, huh?
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, 1-0. Sloppy 1-0, but 1-0. That's the most important thing. We'll start there. What'd you think? And defensively specifically, because I've kind of given this team a mulligan. Am I being too kind? Uh, the field was so bad. Who cares at this stage? You get out with the win, and now we can start evaluating. Agree or disagree, Thomas?
I totally agree. The field was awful. I think all the Bryce Huff talk, I'm sure we'll talk about, is he going to be a bust on the defensive line? There's no way to know if Bryce Huff or anyone else on that defensive line is going to actually be great or bad this year because they were slipping and sliding all over the place. I agree. I think anytime you go into week one with very little preseason action, the main goal is to A, win, B, stay healthy, and C, look relatively competent. And I think Philadelphia did all those things. And I'll go even further past sloppy. I think that they, or even, backtrack from sloppy, I thought they looked pretty good. I mean, you take away offensively the turnovers and a couple of missed tackles on defense, and they played pretty great against what everyone in the media is claiming to be the, dark horse MVP favorite in Jordan Love, a really great team in the Green Bay Packers. And like you said, they won, and that's all that matters.
Agreed, Thomas. Good takeaways there. I'm going to, a couple more quick questions on the game before we move into the Atlanta a look ahead to week 2. But Saquon Barkley, man, he comes in, and as you point out, 3 turnovers, and we still put up 34 points. Yeah. Saquon Barkley has 3 touchdowns. What'd you think of his debut in Philly?
I don't know. I mean, Johnny, a little better than Miles Sanders, right? I mean, that was the whole conversation we had last time I was on here. He looks as advertised, and that was the main goal. Is he healthy? And what will he look like behind this offensive line? And A, he looks extremely healthy. This looks like the healthiest we've seen Saquon Barkley maybe in his entire career. The speed and the burst on that first touchdown run was absolutely incredible. I mean, that is top 3 back in the league type of stuff. And really, the holes that were opening up behind Mekhi Becton, behind Cam Jurgens, and the rest of this offensive line goes to show that he is going to be probably the main X factor for Philadelphia this year. Like, what you're getting in A.J. Brown. You know that Jalen Hurts is going to have some really good moments on the ground and through the air. Devontae Smith is going to be great in this offense. But as a defense, when you go up against the Eagles now, you basically have to pick your poison. Do you want to load the box and try and stop Saquon Barkley and then get destroyed over the top by these receivers? Or I think the Packers kind of showed you they wanted to do, stop the receivers, and we'll see what Saquon is capable of. And I think that opening debut is only going to make Kellen Moore's job easier, Jalen Hurts' job easier, because now, especially Atlanta, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a couple of days here, they got to decide, how do you want to be beat by Philadelphia? Is it through the air or on the ground? And if Saquon does exactly what he did in that first game, minus 3 touchdowns, right? $120 on the ground and say 1 touchdown a game, or kind of hovers in that area. I mean, MVP is a real conversation starter if that sort of numbers continue, but top 5 running back in the league again is definitely for sure.
Poor Miles, by the way, Thomas.
Poor Miles.
Poor Miles. But
I
Miles
do feel
said,
bad.
I do not think people give credit for Miles the season he had in 2022, but I digress. Do you think that changed, that performance changed? So you're Raheem Morris, you're coming in this week, defensive-minded coach. Are you worried about Saquon Barkley first, or are you still worried about AJ and Devontae first?
I think at least from a Falcons standpoint, you're definitely more worried about Saquon Barkley, right? The Falcons are kind of built to be good against the pass. They have a really good cornerback in AJ Terrell. They have 2 safeties, both of which Eagle fans wanted the past 2 off seasons. And so you feel like they're going to try their luck at covering these receivers with as little people as possible and make sure that Saquon Barkley doesn't beat you. Because again, once Saquon starts to go, he's just like a downhill train. He just runs away from everybody, and there's no way to stop him. And if Philadelphia gets a lead and Saquon Barkley is hot, so you can keep giving the football to Saquon Barkley, you don't have to throw your way out of being down 10, 12, 14 points, it gets really ugly. So if I was Atlanta, I'd go, okay, no Saquon Barkley today. Let's see what AJ Terrell and Justin Simmons and Jesse Bates can do against Devontae Smith and AJ Brown, which again, it's, better, easier said than done, but I would take my luck and really try and stop Saquon Barkley first.
Yeah, if you're the Falcons, I think that's a good approach, but you just saw AJ Brown kind of mess with Jair Alexander like he wasn't a top corner in the league. He's a tough player to stop, man. So AJ Terrell or not, I think those receivers are going to have a good day. But Thomas, I want to ask you about Jalen Hurts and just what you thought of his opening, week and how he's going to progress in this Kellen Moore offense. He did have a couple bad decision makings. I thought the highs were high. I thought the lows were low. What were your takeaways from Jalen Hurts in week 1?
I think the first interception is probably his worst throw of the night. It doesn't make sense backed up on your own, 2-yard line on 3rd down and 15. And even if somehow Smitty had kind of gotten open. You're still trying to throw a rope, 35 plus yards in the middle of a defense that was really ready for that play. And that's the most egregious one. The second turnover in terms of the drop, in terms of whatever, Cam Jurgens snapped the football earlier, whatever, miscommunication. I don't really chalk that up to anything. I think the other interception, when you go back and watch the film, Brian Baldinger did a great breakdown for the NFL Network. AJ slips, he's open, the ball's a little bit late, it's still across the body, so you don't like it. So sure, there were plenty of ups and downs from Jalen Hurts and plenty of downs that Eagle fans should be concerned about, but the expectations were sky high based on everything we heard from training camp. He doesn't throw interceptions anymore. He hasn't thrown an interception in, 300 snaps or whatever the number was in 35 days. And then
blame Elliott for that one.
Yeah.
I tried to temper people.
And yet, you knew he was going to throw an interception early in this game. I just felt like it was almost a guarantee. But as you mentioned, Zander, the highs were extremely high. And if you go back, and I was watching, there's a guy on YouTube, he did at the quarterback room. I forget what his channel is named, but he
QB School. JT O'Sullivan. He's great. Yeah.
Full hour, basically, of Jalen Hurts' performance versus the Packers. He had some really great highs. And you can see how Kellen Moore's scheme has really opened things up. But the main takeaway from 2023 Jalen Hurts to 2024 Jalen Hurts, guys, is the blitz recognition. 6 of 7 against the blitz. He was absolutely perfect, and he had hot route options when he recognized there was more pressure coming, goes to the line, says something to the lineman, does his little, signal to the wide receivers, and throws hot to A.J. Brown for a first down, comes to Dallas Goedert for a first down. Those were the key things last year that we just didn't have for whatever reason in last year's offense, whether because Kelsey was there or Brian Johnson and Sirianni ran the offense. He didn't throw hot, and he was killed against the blitz. And this game, especially against the Green Bay Packers early on, he, to me, looked night and day better, again, fixing what was the big issue. You take away the turnovers in that game, and Hurts is probably the best quarterback of the entire weekend. The turnovers obviously kind of bring him down a little bit, but I was very, very at least encouraged and impressed that he's going to be much improved from last year.
All right, too much optimism for me. I think what we're talking about, the decision making. I think and by the way, to Baldy, come on, Brian. That was a bad throw. That's Jair Alexander. AJ Brown wasn't open.
Also AJ Brown.
That is a bad throw, which Jalen acknowledged and owned, by the way, yesterday. There were 2 other turnover-worthy throws that people do not recognize because A.J. Brown turned into a defensive back on one. And the other one should have been a pick 6 before he then back-to-back threw it across his body in the red zone, which is a cardinal sin of quarterbacking play in football. To the point that Nick Sirianni correctly said, not sustainable. Not sustainable. The Eagles were the only team in the NFL to win in week 1, losing the turnover battle. Now, if we go back to last year, that was the whole issue. I pointed out the only difference between the Eagles' 22 offense and 23 offense is basically the turnovers. They were better on third downs, statistically. They were better on fourth downs. They were better in red zone. In the situation, the big situational bet. What was the difference? The turnovers. Before last season, Jalen Hurts, Thomas, was one of the most ball security conscious quarterbacks in the NFL. Last year, I've said pretty consistently I was confident it would turn around because I thought it was an anomaly. And here we show up in week 1, and he made more bad decisions in any other start he's ever had for the Philadelphia Eagles. Why are not people more concerned about this?
Well, I think first off, the comparisons between the 2022 offense and 2023, I think it's a little more than just he didn't turn the ball over during the Super Bowl run and he did a lot last year. I think the difference in Shane Steichen and Brian Johnson / Sirianni is a major reason why he looked that much more comfortable in the offense. And listen, yes, he had plenty of throws. You mentioned the 2 kind of down there in the red zone, one of which could have been a pick 6. First week rust, I think, can easily be chalked off towards some of it. And I also think that it's a brand new offense that he is still working through to try and figure out. We expected highs and lows, right? And the highs, again, were so high that I think we can put to bed, or at least for now, because it's a week-by-week league, calm down about the idea that Jalen Hurts is going to be a turnover machine this year. Because if you take what he did in that game and take away 2 of those turnovers, right? Again, he has almost 300 yards passing. He has multiple touchdowns. He has an incredible drive to end the first half to get points, an incredible drive basically to end the game, I think the fourth quarter to get points, and was very good situationally on third down when he needed to be and against the blitz. And so I get the whole idea that Jalen Hurts might suddenly, or not suddenly, might over the course of the past year and a game now be more turnover prone. But last year is really hard for me to look at and go, okay, we know it was a poorly designed scheme. We know that he had very little control over changing the plays at the line, protections, hot routes, like all the bad stuff that you guys obviously, being there covering the Eagles day-to-day chronicled very well, right? There were many giant red flags in Philadelphia last year. And when you go to 2024, you're looking to see where those red flags are. Again, pre-snap, protection. Where does he go with the football on third down? How comfortable is he in the pocket? Is he running better than he did last year when it seemed like he was hurt for half the season? All those things I check. Yes, turnovers, I think, will continue to come down. I think we're going to see a much, safer Jalen Hurts in terms of protecting the football on Monday. And until you have multiple games here in 2024 where Hurts has thrown multiple interceptions and lost games due to it, I think we got to calm down a little bit here. And again, you mentioned it, the only team to win but also lose the turnover battle. I think that gives more hope to Eagle fans and the fact that this team is so good and so stacked, they can recover from a multitude of mistakes. Whereas last year, Cardinal game, Giants twice, they were not good enough, especially scheme-wise, to recover whenever Jalen turned the ball over. So I got to see him throw a lot more interceptions for me to start panicking, but I wanted to really latch on to the good in that game and, again, beat a really good defense in Green Bay and come out 1-0.
Good point, Thomas. I thought your 3 points too at the top were good when you go into a game like this. September is kind of the new preseason, right? I mean, They don't play preseason, so it was a lot of sloppy football all over the week. Now moving into week 2, you're going up against the Falcons. They didn't look great in week 1. They lost to the Steelers, who didn't even score an offensive touchdown. If you're Kellen Moore, if you're Jalen Hurts, how you approaching this game and how you're gonna beat the Falcons in week 2?
I think it's very similar to everything that I just mentioned, right? Week 1, you're still trying to learn. You got to see multiple weeks of bad Kirk Cousins, multiple weeks of bad Falcons to go, okay, this team is actually bad versus where they're at on paper, right? Before the season, we all thought the Falcons were easily, at least I did, the best team in the NFC South. They finally have a competent quarterback, Bijan Robinson, weapons on the outside, and the defense, which you mentioned, didn't give up a touchdown against the Steelers, is vastly improved from where they've been the past couple of years. And so I think you can watch the Pittsburgh tape if you're the Eagles. They obviously have. Try and figure out, how they exploited Kirk Cousins and, try and get excited about the idea of maybe having a lesser opponent than what you played in Green Bay a couple of days ago. But I would be very, very cautious about this Atlanta Falcon team because if they lose on Monday night, they then play the, I think it's the Chiefs in week 3. Like they're staring down the gun barrel of an 0-3 start. After putting all this money into Kirk Cousins and all these weapons with first-round draft picks, they're going to come out hungry and really, really, I think, angry to try to prove to the rest of the league that they are not, the same old Falcons from the past couple of years. So I think you got to be very careful. And I think defensively, I don't want to say they're a better defensive team than the Packers because I said before the Packer game, it's a top 10 defense there in Green Bay. Excellent corners. You mentioned Jair Alexander. But the Falcons defensively are way better than anything Philadelphia has seen from an Atlanta Falcons team or a Kirk Cousins team the past couple of years. And so I think the Eagles should be fine, but I'd be very cautious going into this game just to be like, okay, just because they didn't play well against the Steelers week 1 doesn't mean they're going to look a lot different on Monday night.
Well, and they did play well defensively. I mean, part of it is that they were playing against Justin Fields, so that factors into it. But they didn't allow a touchdown, and 3 of Chris Boswell's 6 field goals were over 50 yards. So it wasn't like that there was a historic week for kickers around the league. By the way, 21 50-yard field goals, which is crazy. Broke the record by 6. That's how much difference there was. So the kickers are getting better and better. But Atlanta's defense, they have players on all 3 levels. I think people don't realize how good Grady Jarrett is. Caden Ellis, whose brother Christian Ellis is a really good linebacker people don't know about. And everybody kind of does know about Jesse Bates and Justin Simmons and A.J. Jarrell. This is a pretty good defense. And Raheem Morris is a defensive-minded head coach. So it should be a good test. But it was interesting, going back to the Jalen. The most impressive thing to me about Jalen Hurts is when you see other quarterbacks around the league, and you saw a bunch of them in week 1, have bad games, bad decision making, they kind of let it bother them.
Yep.
And he was there in the 4th quarter making plays because they were trying to run. They ran Saquon 8 times on that final drive that took 7:26, but they only got 15 yards. The big plays were Jalen Hurts on the scramble, carrying 2 defenders to a first down, and Jalen Hurts to Devontae Smith on the 2 big throws, where Devontae, by the way, at his size, carrying defenders for a first down on one of them. That's amazing. That, to me, is the positive of Jalen Hurts. He's so relentless. You can play 55 minutes, 56 minutes, and we've seen this in the past during the Super Bowl season, Indianapolis game, Arizona game, Houston game. The team was not playing well, and all of a sudden he puts them on their back at a big moment. That, to me, is the most impressive part about Jalen Hurts. And I want to take that to the defense, which did not play well overall against Green Bay. But boy, early in the game, situationally in the red zone, it was great. So there were little situations where you saw, all right, this is going to be different with Vic Fangio.
Yeah.
And I think that part was positive. So how do you weigh the good and the bad defensively? We've already done it with Jalen, so I'll turn you towards the defensive side. Like Jordan Love left a lot of meat on the bone because of the field. He was slipping.
Sure.
And there were receptions. Dontavian Wicks dropped like 3 passes he should have caught. It could have been like 500 yards of total offense for the Packers if they didn't leave meat on the bone. So where do you kind of weigh that?
I think, again, you go back to the idea of it being week 1. And so defensively, you're still trying to figure things out. And listen, they picked on Avonte Maddox a lot, especially early in that game. The touchdown pass to Christian Watson's was all on Avonte Maddox. I really feel like this defense can, especially in the secondary, greatly improve when Isaiah Rodgers comes back. And I think he will play on Monday night, and seeing how they, put him on the outside in nickel situations. Quinion goes to the inside. I think things are going to improve there. But I overall was very impressed by the defense. I think that last year we watched probably one of the worst Eagle defenses we've seen in the past 4 or 5 years, at least in the secondary, get carved up by everybody. I mean, I go back to that Cardinal game all the time.
I would add worse than like 50 years.
Yeah, it's terrible, right? I mean, Kyler Murray and the Cardinals were awful last year, and they came into Philadelphia in what basically turned out to be a must-win game to win the 1 seed, and they shredded us. It wasn't even close. Darius Slay against the Packers, 2 receptions for 15 yards. People harping on him being a little old and a little washed. Thought he was fantastic. Quinion obviously is going to be one of the key pieces on this defense as a rookie, which is incredible. Carter Johnson and Reed Blankenship played well together. I think they're still trying to kind of work things out in terms of playing together for the first time. And then the linebackers. I mean, everyone, including myself, I had them as the weakest link on this defense. And yet Nakobe Dean looked really good. He only gave up that one kind of deep pass where he, I think, was in zone coverage and let the tight end slip behind him for 20 or 30 yards. Besides that, he was pretty great. Zach Bond, I mean, I know you guys got to see him at training camp, but everything that I kept reading and hearing was, up and down day for Zach Bond. Well, we'll see.
Nobody saw that coming.
Really good.
Zach should have been Defensive Player of the Week, but they're not
so.
going to give it to they never give it to the same team. But yeah, I thought I gave him the game ball. He's thought great. he was the best player on the field. And I don't know anybody who saw that coming.
Yeah, I think the one thing that you got to, again, hope gets better is the pass rush. But go back to the Super Bowl, you have 77 sacks in the 2022 season, and they can't get to Patrick Mahomes because, Reddick is slipping all over the place. I think the same can be said about this field. If they can't get to Kirk Cousins on Monday night, guys, then we can start to really go, okay, is Bryce Huff worth $17 million? Is Josh Huff ever going to be kind of this really good number 2 pass rusher that we all think he can be, and yet he really hasn't been throughout his career? I thought Jalen Carter played a lot better than his team worst PFF grade, which was very bizarre. Jordan Davis flashed here and there, wasn't fantastic, but I think overall the defense is fine, and I think it's going to be dramatically improved week to week. And again, we go back to Jalen Hurts struggling early on, the defense holding well in the red zone, and then it kind of switched to where Jordan Love started to move the ball down the field as Jalen got comfortable. Brand new defense and Vic Fangio, people still trying to figure things out. Once we get to week 6, 7, 8, I really think the offense and defense are going to be absolutely humming. And this is, on paper, a top 10 defense, in my opinion, if the pass rushers turn out to be what we expect them to be. And if Bryce Huff has a sack and a couple of pressures on Monday night, it all gets put to bed, and the Eagle defense is going to be just fine.
Agreed. I think that's one of the biggest things coming into week 2 here is that Eagles defensive line. But I just want to say real quick on the defense, you were impressed with the defense in week 1. I was impressed with the red zone defense. I mean, if you give up 2 touchdowns at the start there, that's a different football game. But you give up 2 field goals, it's manageable. Eagles then take the lead. I thought that was huge on the defense to get 2 stops there early in the season before the Packers offense really got going. But coming into this game, you've already talked about it, Thomas. That defensive line needs to get pressure. Kirk Cousins was a little bit of a statue in week 1, not moving like he normally moves. What do you expect from the defensive line coming into this week 2 game?
I mean, the Falcons have worked hard, and I live in Atlanta. Just a little side note here. And so I'm around Falcons fans all of the time. I used to work at the Falcons flagship station back in my radio days. And so I was always around those 8-8 Arthur Smith football teams. And they always wanted to improve the offensive line. And then finally they got McGarry and Lindstrom, and they're going to be really good. And they looked awful. And I know TJ Watt is TJ Watt, but overall against that entire Pittsburgh defensive line, it was really bad. And I think Kirk Cousins' movement is a real factor. I mean, this whole idea of him never really being in the pistol, and suddenly he is in the pistol, and he does very little play action, and he had this least amount of movement in the pocket, however they measure those stats these days, in his entire career, is a big factor. And so I think McFangio is going to sit back and go, I think we can blitz the heck out of this guy and prove either that he can't move and we're going to get a ton of sacks, or he's going to beat us on a couple of one-on-one routes on the outside, and that maybe he is healthy. Then we back off and play the rest of the game a little bit more conservative. But I think you try and light up Kirk Cousins. I think you literally go, Kirk, love you. I think he's been a good quarterback in this league. I think he's, should make the Falcons a lot better. But if that Achilles isn't healed and he can't move, you got to send 4, 5, 6, 0 him. You got to go after him as much as possible, because when you saw it in the highlights of the Steeler game, he's on his back on most of these plays and was forcing a bunch of really bad throws. One resulted in the interception. And I think the Eagle defense is going to do really just fine. I think Jalen Carter is going to have a really, really good game against the interior of that Falcon defense. So I'm pumped. I think the Falcons are a great week 2 opponent, guys, after Green Bay, because we have all these questions based on the field and the travel and Jordan Love this and Jalen Hurts that. If you go in and you beat up on the Atlanta Falcons and you win 31-10, 31-17, Saquon goes crazy, Jalen doesn't turn the ball over, defense gets multiple sacks, I think everybody in Eagle Kingdom is going to go, okay, all right, this team is as good as we thought. Week 1 had its little week 1 outliers and week 1 weirdness, but going forward, this is a very, very good football team, and I really hope that they can prove me right on Monday night.
Yeah, I think there's that opportunity. I see it the same way with Jalen Carter. I mean, this should be a big Jalen Carter week. If you look just the matchup, that's the weakness of that Atlanta offensive line, as you know, being down there. I do think McGarry and Lindstrom are good players. Jake Matthews has obviously been a good player for years, but TJ Watt is different, man. I mean,
pretty good.
Yeah, he can make even good players look bad. So I give them sort of a little bit of a pass when it comes to dealing with TJ Watt. But yeah, the Cousins impact. I don't care what Atlanta says, and they're bending over backwards to say he's healthy.
Right.
He's one of the best play action quarterbacks in football, and you don't use him in play action, then you have the worst offensive coordinator in football. And Zach Robinson comes from the Rams, and all the Rams do is play action.
Yep.
So I find it very hard to believe that Zach Robinson comes from that environment and says, oh, my great play action quarterback, and I don't run play action. He's not healthy.
I think the weirdest part of the entire Falcon thing is that they chose to basically not play Michael Penix in the preseason. He had 1 or 2 drives in their opener, and then they literally came out and said, we don't want to play Michael Penix. We think he's good to go. Kirk's going to be the guy anyway. But if they knew Kirk Cousins was going to be 80%, wouldn't you have wanted Penix to get those snaps, right? We are, at least in Atlanta, they're trending down the line of a 1-4 start, a 2-5 start, and the Penix calls are going to be going crazy. And so it's just so bizarre to me that they have this quarterback they drafted in the top 10 to be the replacement, because apparently they thought, oh, I don't know, maybe Kirk's not going to be 100%. Then they don't give him reps in the preseason. And so now they got to ride with Kirk. And then I guess a really green Michael Penix, if we get to that point, it's it seems very poorly managed and very obvious that Kirk is not 100%. Now, if you liked us up on Monday night, John, then maybe we just, okay, week 1 outlier, right? But the movement seems to be a real issue.
Yeah. Well, Nick kind of pointed out, and this was an interesting point that I said, yeah, maybe. Yeah. He mentioned when you have a difficult rehab, and with Kirk, it was a torn Achilles. You have some good days and you have some bad days. And maybe last Sunday was a bad day for him, and maybe this Monday is a good day for him. So you got to be prepared. Yeah. And I think that's how the Eagles are handling it. And then you brought up the fact of their schedule, upcoming schedule, and what it looks like on paper, and it could be a really bad start. But you play into the desperation aspect of it at all, because Atlanta's going to be a desperate team to turn around something in week 2.
They're a desperate fan base. I mean, literally after all the moves that they made this offseason to really, again, give them the best team that they've had in 5, 6, 7 years since the Matt Ryan years, way back whenever he was actually in his prime. They still didn't sell out Mercedes-Benz Stadium week 1. Like literally the most hype you can have for your football team is going into week 1 because we're all 0-0. The Panthers think they're going to win the Super Bowl. The Falcons, the Eagles, we all think we're going to be good. And they still didn't sell it out. There were still way more Steeler fans in Mercedes-Benz than Falcon fans. And if this continues and they lose games early on, there's going to be nobody there by week 8, right? And that's the whole
Thomas, I don't want to insult your city, but that's a bad sports town, dude. That is a bad sports town.
It's a sports town that's desperate for a good NFL team. They've had good college football teams in Georgia.
But the Braves have always struggled. I mean, the Braves were good the Braves have been consistently good over a long period of time. I mean, attendance-wise and teams taking over stadiums, it's easy to do in Atlanta. I don't want to. Yeah, it's easy to. Like, you could never do that in Philadelphia.
I agree.
Never,
I agree.
Ever
but
do that.
If you had 5 straight years, the past 3 straight years of 8-8 in Philadelphia, and then they laid an egg on week 1, fans would start to kind of be like, I'm tired of this. Like, I'm tired of the same thing. And so I get what's happening in Atlanta.
You know what? It does happen with the Phillies. You know what? You're right. I apologize. Because the Knicks fans took over the Wells Fargo Center.
Yeah, they did. First time I've seen that in a long time.
Yeah. Fans get fed up.
So I apologize.
No, I mean, listen, if you give me the same mediocre garbage every single year and yet promise that it's going to be fixed, you gaslight me into thinking, no, we're really trying, and you keep going 8-8. Fans are just going to $300 for an upper level ticket at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. No thanks. Like, why would I pay to watch that? So desperation is really the main factor to me in this one. The Falcons have to win this game, or else it's going to get really ugly really quickly here in Atlanta.
Yeah, newsflash, Atlanta. I don't think they're gonna. But Thomas, before we get your prediction on the way out, I do have one more question for you. In week 1, it was Saquon Barkley and it was Zach Ball, and they were your 2 players for the Eagles on offense, on defense that stood out, that were the MVPs of each side. Who's going to be in week 2 on offense and defense?
I am really hoping Bryce Huff is going to be good, and I don't know if I should say Bryce Huff is going to be the MVP, because I don't know if I truly believe it. It's more like a want, because I think he has the moves. I think he has the ability to be a great pass rusher, and I just want to make sure that all the negative talk about him all throughout Philadelphia this week doesn't get to him, doesn't get him down. Like, I'm hoping he channels it and just comes out and is like, guys, I had double-digit sacks with the Jets last year and didn't even play 50% of the snaps. Like, just let me get on a good field. I'll show you what I can do. So my hope is Bryce Huff, but I'm more excited to watch Quinyon Mitchell play again, because, I mean, geez, when's the last time we had a homegrown, fantastic cornerback at what already seems like trending at an all-pro level? Like, knock on wood, don't get too crazy, but he looked incredible. So I'll go Huff because I'm hopeful, and then Quinyon because I love what he did week 1. And I think on offense, again, Atlanta's going to try and stop Saquon Barkley. So I think Devontae Smith goes off. I think it's very similar to the Viking game that he had. I believe it was week 2 last year on Monday Night Football against Kirk Cousins, when he had an incredible night against the Minnesota Vikings. Different team, but I'll take Smitty on offense. And I'll say Jalen Hurts doesn't turn the football over, John. I'm going to give you that
prediction right now. That's the most important part of all. Hey, first of all, Thomas, and everybody follow Thomas on the X platform. Real Thomas Mott. Thomas Mott Show on YouTube does a tremendous job. I'm with you on Bryce Huff. Everybody says I'm negative. I think Bryce Huff is going to be fine. Yeah. With Jalen, hey, the head coach, send the hate mail to the head coach this week. Not sustainable. And he's right. Nick Sirianni's right. And Jalen Hurts said the same thing. He took ownership for the bad decisions. All I'm saying is it's not sustainable. It's got to change. You can't make that many turnover throws in a game as a veteran quarterback in the NFL. And if Dak Prescott did that, Eagles fans would be all over him. And the fact that they were able to overcome it is great, but it's not sustainable. That's the only point.
I agree.
And it's got to turn around.
I agree. And if he doesn't turn the football over, this team will score 30 points nearly every single week.
Easily,
I mean,
yeah.
it should have been 40, right? You don't turn the football over, they're scoring 40 against the Packers on a very bad field. I think if they don't turn it over, it's going to be a very, very fun night on Monday.
Yeah, I mean, you put up 34 with 3 turnovers, and then even on the defense, you only give up 29 when you gave them the ball twice inside the red zone. So I thought good stuff from there. Thomas, last question, man. What's your prediction for Monday night? I'm going to put you on the spot. What's your prediction?
I got 31-17. I'm very confident. If Kirk Cousins in that offense scores more than 24 points, we're going to have some serious problems in Philadelphia on Tuesday morning. Like, I'll be the first to lead the charge with you, John, that the defense is like, oh, boys, this doesn't look good. But I do not see Kirk Cousins scoring more than 24. I've hit him at 17, and that feels generous. And I think the Eagle offense rolls. I think 31 points is very likely. I'll go 31-17.
No, this is a Bijan day. The only person beating the Philadelphia Eagles on Monday night is Bijan Robinson. I think he's the guy you got to stop. And he's a very talented player, very gifted player, but still very young, still a lot of work to do. But that's the guy I would be most concerned about if I'm Vic Fangio. And you do have to, I mentioned that good day, bad day when it came to rehab. You kind of feel it out. I like your thought there. Obviously, if you test Cousins early and he's got the accuracy and he's throwing the football and he feels good, then maybe you got to back off. But yeah, I'm gonna worry about Bijan Robinson first.
I agree, 100%.
Yeah, no doubt. Thomas, thanks for joining the show, man. Make sure you guys check out his YouTube channel at the Thomas Mott Show, one of the best on YouTube, and follow him on X at Real Thomas Mott. Thomas, thanks for being here today, man. We'll talk to you again soon. All right, brother.
Thanks, guys. Go Birds.
Yeah. Go Birds. There's Thomas Mott. Good stuff from Thomas Mott today. I love getting him on the program. He's doing a great job over on YouTube, so go check him out, as I just mentioned. So good stuff there, Johnny Mac. Just 5 minutes left here on not only the day, but the week here of Birds 365. It's a football Friday. We got nothing to look forward to this weekend for the Eagles. The game is not till Monday, so we'll have another show still. So Johnny Mac and I will not be giving any predictions until Monday's show as we lead into the game. On Monday morning.
I think you kind of guess our prediction.
Yeah, I know. Mine is all but the score is out there on what my prediction is for the game. But closing thoughts today, Johnny Mac, on this Football Friday edition of Birds 365.
Yeah, don't jump on the sword. Come on, Thomas. Don't jump on the sword for Jalen Hurts. He's a big boy. He can take it. I
thought Thomas had good points, though, about the week one and about.
He had his worst grade as a starting quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles. The worst. Like, the thing that I can't stand is the blame on the coaches rather than the players. And I get why people want to do it. I get it. I completely get it. The guy played at a much higher level in 2022 under the crappy offense that everybody thinks. I guess it was a little bit less crappy back then. In the static offense, he played. It was the best offense in Philadelphia Eagles history, to be honest, over their 91-year period. It's a concern to me because it keeps happening. When it stops, I'll be the first to say it. And I give them all the credit in the world for the relentlessness, as I said, and it coming back. But anybody telling you that was a good football game by the quarterback is lying to you. Or they don't understand what they're watching. You do not do that as a high-level starting quarterback. And that's what Jalen Hurts is. I'm not saying he isn't. But from everybody on down, Tom Brady to Peyton Manning on down in recent history, everybody has bad games. That was a bad game. It's okay to say it. It doesn't mean Atlanta's going to be a bad game. Monday night's going to be a bad game. That was a bad game. And they still scored. The positive is they still managed to score 34 points.
Yeah, and I
And
do
they
think it's
still
week one. I mean, John, like I get it. I'm with you, and I was hard on Jalen after the game about it, but it's week one. I mean, you got to add that
Well, it
context
is week one, but it was week one for Brock Purdy. It was week one for Patrick Mahomes. It was week one for Derek Carr. It was
All
week
guys
one
that
for
played with
Baker
great.
Mayfield. It was week one for everybody else who played well, and it was week one for even the Sam Darnolds of the world. And the
No, you're right.
and
I mean, look,
the-
you're right. You are. You're right. Yusto checks in with a super chat. Thank you, Yusto. He says preseason playing time, will that help Hurts with turnovers? I mean, maybe they're not going to play him in the preseason, so now is the preseason basically for him. So that's kind of what I was saying with week one. But John's right. I mean, look, everybody had week one, so you can't single him out and give him the excuse. But I'm with Thomas in that I think he's going to be better. I think he's going to clean it up.
Well, I think he's definitely going to be better because he has to be better. That's kind of my point.
I see what you're saying.
I just don't get but that's me. I do get it. I shouldn't say I shouldn't. Nobody wants to criticize the quarterback. There are certain players you can criticize, and there are certain players you can't criticize in this town. For instance, Avonte Maddox. Everybody shits on Avonte Maddox for whatever reason. You can't shit on Jalen Hurts. Not that you should shit on anybody, but you can point out. I can point out Avonte Maddox played poorly, and nobody has a problem with it. And it's not just quarterback versus, because there's certain players. Jalen Carter played poorly. Can't point that out. Not to the level of the quarterback. People don't want to hear it, but he did. He played poorly. It happens. Not everybody has good games, and part of it with the defense was the field. But I mean, there's got to be some objectivity. That's my thing. And I'm not going to lie to you and say he played well. He did not play well.
You're right. I mean, there's no doubt about it. You're right. He has to. If we want to be a Super Bowl team, which is what a lot of fans are expecting, which is what I think the Eagles organization's expectations are, not expectations, but that's what their hope is. You got to clean it up. There's no doubt about it. You're right about that. Let's go to Brian Fleming, who leaves us $20 because we're running out of time here. But we have another big super chat, and I want to get to it. Brian, thank you for checking in, man. I appreciate the support. I got the dog pushing in the office right now as I end the show here. He says the Hurts apologist. He can't read a defense and needs an aid. In 22, he was helped by the RPO zone read. In 23, Sirianni's awful scheme. He was third in the league in picks, and this year without motion, he's 5 of 13 with 2 picks. I think Brian's going a little overboard there, but what do you have to say to Brian?
Well, the assumption that he plays well, I would need another hour. The assumption that he played well with motion on one game versus didn't play well with motion on one game. Again, if you want to go back to 22 with no motion, he's never played better. He was a runner-up at MVP. So that can't be the issue. The issue is, and again, it's boring. The issue is execution and making proper reads, proper throws, understanding how it reads and things like that. It looks like the early positivity. It looks like Kellen Moore has him better prepared to deal with the blitz than Brian Johnson and Nick did last year. Early, very early. That's the positive. Again, but theoretically, the negative is Jalen Hurts as a starting quarterback has never had that many turnover-worthy throws in any NFL game with Kellen Moore. That's not a positive. Is it Kellen Moore's fault? I don't think so. I think it's on the quarterback. But if you want to shit on Brian Johnson and Nick Sirianni, well, you better shit on Kellen Moore then. Because he never had that many turnover-worthy throws under the crappy Brian Johnson offense, crappy Nick Sirianni offense. I mean,
Brian follows up. He says the RPO simplified it in 22, which, maybe he's right about.
Well, the RPO simplifies it. The RPO simplified things for Nick Foles, which he will admit on Monday.
Yeah, but I think his point was that's what helped Jalen.
Well, of course it helped Jalen. They scaled back. When they started 2-5, they scaled back the offense to help Jalen. Coaches don't get credit for that. Nick Foles gives Jason Kelce credit for his run because he simplified things for Nick Foles and he was able to play freely. It can work both ways. in the case of people blaming it because of Jalen's inability, how about accountability for the quarterback is all I'm asking for. All Nick Sirianni talks about, and by the way, it's not Nick Sirianni. I'm not talking about the Eagles. The Eagles have accountability. I'm talking about the fan base. Accountability for the quarterback, like everybody else, you place accountability on. I'm getting sick of the excuses.
No, I hear you. I get it. You're right. I do think you're right. And the Eagle fan in me wants to say you're not right, but you are right. He has to be better. There's no doubt about it. And that was one of his worst games in terms of decision making in week 1. Let's see what he does here in week 2. Johnny Mac, closing thoughts though on the show. We just kind of gave him here on Jalen Hurts. Brian, thank you for the super chat, man.
Well, that was from Thomas is optimistic. I get it, but I'm like, if we can't admit that that's a poor game, what are we doing? Is kind of where I'm at. That's all. And they overcame it.
Also admit
and
that
I
on the other side of it.
What's that?
Can you also then admit on the other side of it, boy, if he forget being perfect, if he gets halfway better, this offense is going to be unreal.
Yeah, that's the point. And that's what Nick was saying. It's unsustainable to think that continue and you continue to get out of games with wins. It's not sustainable. That's the only point. I also am forefront, and I asked the question to Nick about it. The ability to shake off all those poor plays and still make big plays down the stretch, because for whatever reason, because 3 touchdowns, player of the week, it wasn't Saquon on that final drive. It was Jalen Hurts. So he deserves credit for that final drive. The throws to Devontae, the first down run, that's tremendous to be able to overcome how he had played to that point and come up with those big plays late. The relentlessness, the mental strength, all that is tremendous. But the turnover worthy throws are what they are. And if Dak Prescott did that,
we'd rip him.
Ooh.
No, you're right. Mad Bird checks in. Love Mad Bird. He says Johnny Mac is 1,000% correct. So you are, look, you're not speaking in no void. I think people understand what you're saying. Fans understand. We have a knowledgeable fan base. I always say that on Birds 365. Some of the smartest, best fans in the country, in the world, really, because Eagles fans are everywhere. But so good stuff, Johnny Mac. Good show. Good breakdown there. I appreciate you putting your point of view out there, especially with that. I know you're an objective reporter and you feel the need to say it, and you laid it out there very well, Johnny Mac. So good show today and good shows this week, Johnny Mac. Any game top of mind for you as we close out the week this weekend? That's not the Eagles.
Woo, I haven't even. Man, I got to think.
Too focused on the Eagles. That's right. You are.
I'm interested to see our early games. Brock Purdy against Brian Flores. I talked about that a little bit. The Lions and the Buccaneers. Buccaneers played well. I don't think the Lions did. So I want to see the Lions if they can get back to form.
Yeah, they didn't look as good as I thought they were going to look.
Packers without Jordan Love. That's gonna be interesting to see a little bit. Some of the late games look ugly.
Yeah, the late games, the 1:00 slate's pretty good. There's a lot of games at 1:00.
Those 4:00 games, Rams, Cardinals, Steelers, Broncos. The Broncos Bo Nix looked just.
Anybody that watched SEC knew that Bo Nix sucked, but nobody wanted to listen to me. Everybody says, "Oh, he's with Sean Payton. He's gonna be great." I think he's gonna suck.
Bengals, Chiefs. Bengals look terrible. Bears, Texans. Caleb Williams looked terrible. I think the Texans got a chance though. With CJ Stroud, he's just a natural. And as you see with the young quarterbacks this year, that's rare.
That's rare. CJ Stroud's a special football player. That kid is going to be very good. Yeah, he already is very good, but his career could be a good one. I mean,
some interesting ones. I think Lions Buccaneers interests me most, followed by. I keep waiting, and I think if anybody's going to do it, it's going to be Brian Flores against Brock Purdy.
Let's see what happens in that game. James Carver knows what I'm talking about. He's an Auburn fan. They were all ready. They were all happy when Bo left and went to Oregon. No doubt, James Carver. He stunk
He was great in
Alabama
Oregon.
fan. Loved Bo Nix at Auburn because it was an easy win. He stunk at Auburn. But
Ooh.
all right, that's going to do it, everybody.
Alabama hate to Auburn.
Yeah, but Bo Nix did stink, whether you're an Alabama fan or not. He stunk, John.
He was good in Oregon. He was a good college player, but he was also 105 by that point. What is that? A 6 year as a starter?
Yeah, right.
He should be good in college. That's a big difference than being good. He stunk last week. I can tell you that.
Yeah. All right, we're way over time here. Good stuff. It's 10:08. Holy mackerel, Johnny Mac. That's a little bit of Birds 365 after hours for everybody. Appreciate everybody being here. Hit that like button. Johnny Mac, great shows today. Great shows all this whole entire week. We'll talk to you again on Monday morning. All right, my man.
All right, sounds good. Everybody have a good weekend. Get ready. Monday Night Football.
Big Monday game, everybody. Predictions coming on the Monday show. I expect to see all of you guys here on Birds 365, our Birds 365 faithful. Love each and every one of you. Thank you for your support of the show and of the channel. We'll catch you Monday on Birds 365.
You've been listening to Birds 365, the destination for the passionate Eagles football fan who bleeds green. If it's Eagles football, we're talking about it. Debate inside the locker room and guests that are some of the greatest football minds from around the region. We hope you enjoyed the show. We know we had a blast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on social media at JAKIB Sports. See you next time on Birds 365.